Hey everybody, this is Petey from the Spin Rack, and we also have
Calvin Ellis, and I want to rock.
today, separately, we've been listening to the Robservations podcast, where Rob Liefeld is spilling his guts on the past. It's a lot of, I think one of the things we can say positively about it is from his perspective as we do our recollections of history from our perspective. And he has a lot of energy and it's engaging and all that. But when you do it something from your perspective, at times it can be very biased.
Um, okay, I can't go that far with you. I don't know about perspective at the end of the day when it comes to, I mean, you want to be as fair as possible. You don't want
Yes.
you want to sling anything, but positive, it's just more like, okay, this is a vehicle for you to get your say
Yes.
based on this. I'm not too sure about perspective in terms of if there is a positive about it, it's that okay, you do get to learn about some of the inner workings and behind the scenes and history of that particular time, which is a big moment in comics history, and you do get to hear some of it from the horse's mouth. Unfortunately, and this is one of the reasons why they push biographies as opposed to autobiographies. Not everyone who was in the moment is a reliable narrator, and
Yes.
unfortunately, listen to Rob, especially when you corroborate it with some of the other stuff that's out there. You're like, I'm not too sure about what it is that you're saying here, but let's get into it.
Well, I think because we've seen there was obviously Image Comic Books getting together in 91 and 92, big success. Rob Liefeld being the first one pushed out, then Rob Liefeld sort of coming back, and now they've been meeting up and going to these press events together. And Rob has been there, and it's been a lot of fun. And they bring up the past and none of the bad stories and this, that, and the other. With this podcast, and I think I pointed out, I was talking about it where I think Rob in his podcast routinely talks about Byrne sort of saying comments and sort of gags about different artists and people of his peers, stuff that he probably has said to them to their face. Some of the stuff that Rob is doing is really, I don't think that he'll be able to go back to the image panels anymore because there is a slant, not really a slant against, no, there's a slant, there's a subtle slant to some of his peers in the image crowd because I don't think Jim Valentino is his friend, and I guess they're not as close as they were. But Rob has never really given, even in this podcast, given Jim Valentino credit for bringing Alan Moore to Image. Like he's the one who connected with Bissett, and then the Larry Marder talked to them and said, "This is all exactly what Steve Bissett said." That Larry Martin said to Steve Bissett, "What they really want is not just you and Rick Reich and Tom Burnham, and we actually want you guys to connect with Alan Moore." And ultimately, it's like, "Yeah, we can try that." And Alan was cool because he needed money, and they put it together. And then, of course, at the same time, when Jim Valentino announced it, Jim Lee stole the thunder. Um, Todd McFarlane did a Spawn issue before 1963 came out. So they're very competitive. You're not supposed to steal people from each other. They weren't supposed to steal freelancers, but that doesn't make any sense. They're freelancers. That's what Rob has kind of pointed out. But they should have never had a rule on the books to say you can't take from anyone else's when they're dealing with freelancers. Freelancers jump around.
Theft of talent is a regular thing in an industry that thrives on talent. So if you don't want to steal talent, then you got to have contracts.
Yep, exactly. So with that's to give you a brief thing on that. Then when you go, there's not much. He just with Mark Silvestri, he kind of points out Mark as the top talent as far as artists to kind of take the other guys down a peg. Now all of them, even Jim Lee would say, well, Jim Lee said he said it was good having Mark there because he could academically draw. It's better because some of us can't draw feet. So there was a little ribbing as far as the brotherhood, but then there's a lot with Liefeld going at Jim Lee saying, "Hey, Jim Lee was going to this Heroes Reborn, and he was trying to sell his company." Now this isn't an eye opener because he'd already said it maybe 4 or 5 years ago with Kevin Smith saying that at the time I was doing Heroes Reborn, I was thinking about selling my company and being editor in chief of Marvel. He said it without, not like something that Rob said at one point and then he owned up to it. He said they were in talks. The only problem was that Marvel wanted to pay him in stock. And he was like, "Hey, if you guys go belly up, I get the stock is going to be worth anything. I'll get nothing for my company." And ultimately that went away. And you can see the same deal sort of work out for Quesada because they
Just a
did.
quick, just a quick chime in, and he was right.
Yes, yeah, yep.
You
So
know,
it's
and
all
he was
above
right.
board. Yes,
Don't get paid in stock.
it wasn't above board to the Image partners but he doesn't have to tell the Image. He did. They say that he did not tell I guess it's Larry Martin. He did. When Larry Martin got a hint of it, he said, "No, I'm not selling," and then he did. But that, as a businessman, it could have ruined the deal. So I mean, business is business. You're gonna do what you're gonna do, and obviously there was some
The idea,
animosity towards Jim Lee because of this.
well, the idea again is that Image was supposed to be like it's good. What I'm going to say is oxymoronical, but an independent collective. So all of these guys were supposed to be, for the most part, independent entities to do what they wanted to do. And then I hear all these guys coming down on them when they decide, oh, I'm going to make this particular move or that particular move, or they're trying to couch it when they do something they know that goes against. And to be honest, it's only three people. It's only McFarlane, Lee, and Liefeld.
That's
It's
what they
nobody else.
say. That's what they say too.
There's nobody else who really comes in. There's nobody else who really comes into this. And Jim Lee, I think, is pretty much above board with what he wanted to do, because he did it. At the end of the day, he went to DC. He went to DC, and exactly what he wanted to do with Marvel, he ended up doing. He ended up doing with DC. Well, that's another show. That's another show altogether. But he was pretty much above board with that. Liefeld, however, it's almost an erotic torch that he has for taking shots at Todd McFarlane at this point, simply because I guess temperamentally Liefeld and McFarlane didn't get on the longer things went on, but it's hard for me to take him seriously anytime he starts doing that mocking voice of
Oh
Todd
my goodness.
McFarlane. Okay, anytime he decides to do that mocking voice of Todd McFarlane, it's hard for me to take him. It's hard for me to take him seriously because you're just taking a shot, and I really don't want to listen to what he has to say. In some instances, I can understand that, but anytime that you're relating something with Todd McFarlane, okay, you're just coming over here, you're taking a shot at the dude for the way that he talks. That's one, and then he loves to bring up numbers, and he wants to bring up numbers almost like these guys want to do. A versus battle with who can beat who in a fight, and the numbers are not contribute. The numbers are contributory towards, okay, these were the sales figures and so on and so forth, but not necessarily everything that was going on at the time. So you could say, well, yeah, I was putting out the most books, but you didn't have to pay for them. Okay, so I was putting out 13 books, and look at comparison. Look at Superman, and look at these guys. Look, yeah, but those, DC has to pay for the books that it puts out, be it Superman or anybody else. Spider-Man, you got to pay for those books, be it Marvel or anybody else. And the reason why they will put out that many books is because those books are top sellers for them, and they know that the money that they get on those books also allows them to put out other stuff as well. That's that's just business 101. You get top seller. You do with movies all the time. You got these really big movies. That money helps to make out some of the smaller stuff. And then if the smaller stuff does well, great. That's where your big profit comes in. And it doesn't feel like he's really being square with that at the end of the day. I was putting out X amount of books, yeah, but you weren't paying for them.
Yeah.
You weren't ponying up the cash for them. And then the idea of, well, I was, leaving Image anyway. I was like, yeah, but you made certain that you understood what your position with Image was before you decided to give them your walking papers, which was also clearly established by more than one source. But when it's coming from you, I don't get to hear that. Instead, I get to hear more mocking of Todd McFarlane, more defensive couching in terms of numbers, in terms of sales, in terms of the way that you want the way that what you want people to know about it, as opposed to what exactly was going on about the whole thing. And that's not to say, again, that's not taking one person's side or the other, but listening to that, especially when you do have information that's readily accessible outside of Comics Journal magazine, of course, and I understand that Wizard and Hero magazine weren't necessarily Comics Journal or Comics Interview or any of those other magazines that were more, well, I don't want to call them pros, but more of a traditional, really more of a traditional into it's a, let me just say, a typeset magazine, as opposed to what Wizard would have been, which was a more gloss magazine. But they still reported stuff, and for the most part, a good percentage of what they reported was still reported accurately at the end of the day. So there's plenty of stuff out there to corroborate what was going on, and the whole idea of, well, I'm establishing what was going on with the feud. Like, no, you're setting up once more to take shots at Todd McFarlane from start to finish at the end of the day. Which the thing about it, unfortunately, is that Rob Liefeld, without a doubt, made some very smart business decisions, in terms of what he did as a creator, as an artist, as a writer, from I think from start to finish, with what he was doing with comics. I don't really consider him being currently involved with comics. And I think he made some really smart business decisions. And he did some stuff that when you look at it, it's like, well, that doesn't necessarily smell right. And a maybe not, so it doesn't have to be exhaustive, but a forthright take on that by him, would be great. Because at one point, yeah, he could have went and shot all this stuff at Todd McFarlane and all, look at your Spawn, it came out #2 and this, that, and the other, and look, you got egg on your face. But if you look now, Todd McFarlane has the longest running book at Image Comics. Okay, without a doubt, Tom McFarlane has a storied place in comic books history, as compared to Rob Liefeld at the end of the day. So time is long, and if you want to judge things by time, I don't think that will be something that's going to be very favorable towards you at this point. It was disappointing, because Rob Liefeld can really, if you go for Rob Liefeld for actual comics history that's absent him, it, like when he was giving those that one he did on Bucky being created, Jack Kirby, Joe Simon, all the stuff of Bucky that, and this is countering Ed Brubaker complaining about him not getting any money, when you see how, prevalent and prolific Buffy was, not Buffy, but Bucky, was from his creation all the way up to Winter Soldier, that Bucky was never absent from comics for any long period of time. Those things are very, very insightful. Then you get to this, and
Well, let
like
me
high school schoolyard nonsense.
I'm going to chime in to go back to the business decision, then we'll get back to the actual Liefeld versus McFarlane thing. Only say that I can't, you are correct as far as a businessman, but I think that is this is the main reason why Byrne was really upset with the Image guys, because the way Rob would kind of do it was he'd solicit, or he'd like, all right, I have, what is it, the Mark, like this comic called the Mark, and he'd have some designs, this, that, and the other, solicited, and the next thing you know, he's still the one who broke, even though Todd has Spawn, and Spawn, people want to deal with this guy had the first largest independent comic before that. So they got Spawn movie. Will Smith is like, I'll take this Mark thing. And it's like, yes, we'll do the Mark thing. So it's like but these aren't fully fleshed out ideas that would then turn into, but it led to a lot of money for him to be using Peter to pay Paul, that type of thing. So, okay, this funnels like the Hollywood money, the couple $100,000 or tens of thousands of dollars that come in the company. And if the movie doesn't get made, you still get the money. So it's like this stuff is kind of just flowing through the company with Dooms 4, which is like a redo of the Fantastic Four that I think Spielberg was connected to. I forget what Tom Cruise was connected to, but
Iron
it's
Man.
like, but it's so much stuff that he was, and still to this day, he's kind of soliciting. getting some money, pulling stuff back, that sort of thing, leaving itself an option. Even the awesome deal, which led him to lose, Youngblood. But that's the deal where he kind of looks and says, "Hey, those guys are the bad guys." It's like, no, it's a business deal. You shared that with this other dude because you wanted to make this other company, and that's probably why he doesn't want to be a publisher anymore. But to get to, but this is not, that's, I mean, you're right as far as, but that's good business. If you're able to sort of do some mock-ups, and next thing you know, you're working with Will Smith and Tom Cruise and Steven Spielberg, more power to you. Like, what can I say? You got money going into the company, and you can do other things. So ultimately, in this thing, basically they come. I think Rob in one of his earlier podcasts talks about he was Todd's little buddy, and he does it in the voice, "Oh, well, little buddy," that sort of thing. I can't do the voice. He does it way better than me. He talks about, and he didn't want to be the little buddy anymore. And he kind of, when he started to exert himself to Todd, they started coming into conflict. But at the same time, when they were doing the Heroes Reborn, that's when Todd was, like, very upset about it. And whereas they're like saying, "Hey, we're doing it for, because we like these characters and like these characters," but they didn't necessarily go in to do Captain America, Iron Man, the Avengers, and with a Fantastic Four. Like Jim Lee said, like they came in and said, "Yeah, we'll do some X-Men stuff or Spider-Man," and like, and Marvel was like, "Why would we give you those guys? Like
Yeah,
those
they don't
books are
need the help
selling."
here.
So it's a thing where it wasn't just like they came in and said, "Hey, this is the deal. These books aren't selling." And Jim Lee was at least frank about it, saying that they did ask for the X-Men, and it would have been a big money thing, but they're saying the books are already selling. We got hot talent on it. Like, we don't need to do that sort of sharecropping for our big books. Is these other things where you could prove your work. That's the whole point of being these top guys that can bring sales. And I think just a side note, my opinion was the signing bonus. Rob shouldn't have done it. He should just let the sales speak for themselves and have the bonus come afterwards, saying X amount of sales after 6 months, then you get a bonus. That's the way I think the 2000s, that's where they worked. You get to 12 issues. I think Perez got that. You get a bonus for this. I think the Hidden Years worked the same way. 12 years, X amount of sales. But at the same time, I think Byrne was saying that they were starting to give those bonuses freely to the friends. It's like, well, you missed a couple issues and fill-ins, but you still get the bonus. But anyway, that's just that. It's my business. Liefeld was smart to say, "Hey, let's do a signing bonus," and they gave it to him. So when that happened, Todd was noticeably upset. All the other Image guys had talked about it. Obviously, Eric Larson wasn't against it, but at the same time, because he would do a book with him later, Silvestri wasn't with that, but he did a book later, which is X Men Star Trek, and Jim Valentino was in line with Rob Liefeld, as was Willis Portacio. So you have a lot of the Image creators kind of doing it. The one who was staunch person against it was Todd McFarlane. Rob also points out in a negative way that he was complaining to them about latenesses, and he was the complainer in chief. Now, this is not like, the problem with the Image books was that they were late. I know that Rob is saying, "Hey, I solicited 20 books and we put this out," but we have two past Hero. This Hero magazine had a TV show, and they talked to them about their late books, and both of them said, "Hey, we lost this imprint in Wizard." Where Rob, Jim Lee, they said, "We lost the trust of the fans, and we're trying to build this back," while they were still at Image. And this is what they were both saying. So there was negativity to the missing, to the books they missed. And this is why a lot of creators, well, mainly Byrne, was saying, "Hey, like, this is vape. This is like they're soliciting stuff." And then these other books from the 90s that could have taken up shelf space, instead, they don't get a chance because, Todd McFarlane is soliciting issue 21 when 18 and 19 aren't even out, because he just said, just came to the realtors and say, "Hey, if you don't take these books, you make these books returnable, you're not getting 21." And he's like, "What? Okay, We'll take all of them. We'll do whatever you say. And Rob also says, because he said, I think in the Comics Journal interview, he said that Rob kind of strong armed some people, but Rob did say in his earlier one where he said they picked Malibu. He didn't like Dark Horse. He didn't like the guy at Dark Horse. I forget who else. They didn't want to do Epic, but they said they picked Malibu because we could push them around. And that would be the equivalent of strong arming or being able to be the top creator and say, I want this, I want that. And you can see whatever percentage that Malibu was getting, they decided that we should have our own company that money goes into. So all of them decided to make the Image company its own entity as a publisher. So that money that they were giving Malibu would go into Image. So all of the complaints that Rob is saying, I had 20 books, I had to pay a percentage. The percentage is to publish those 20 books. Just go back to publishing 2 books or something like that. That's kind of lost to saying, hey, I had to pay X amount of dollars. But at one point, we only thought that we were going to get 1 issue or 2 issues out of these guys. We know what monthly comics are like. We know that most artists can only do 1 or 2 titles. And we know that Todd McFarlane had moved away from doing 2 titles a month. We know that I know Silvestri couldn't do 2 titles a month. Definitely knew Rob couldn't. There's no, like else only one that was on the roster that could do 2 books a month was Todd, and he was down to 1 book a month. He was not doing two. He wasn't doing bi-monthly Spider-Man or Spider-Man and Hulk at the same time. He had stopped doing that. He did Spider-Man for a year, and the book, the work dried up. He stopped doing Spider-Man and worked for a while. So I wasn't expecting to come back and doing so. If you have 7 creators, I was expecting 7 books, maybe one. I didn't expect it to be all these solicitations that we would see. So this idea that ultimately Todd stuck to 1, 2, or 1.5, because 1.5, the half would be the miniseries that he did, the Tony Twist stuff, the Blood Feud that he did with Alan Moore, like some of the other things, the Angela miniseries, but they were all short things. They weren't like trying to break the market, and that was keeping his stuff on time because he had a bad stretch of publishing, and then at some point he got Greg Capullo, and it was going online. And that's saying all of them could have found a monthly guy that they could trust to do the work, but they all were kind of like So I've been going on a little too long, but that is the start of it, of doing the Heroes Reborn. And I think Rob is kind of not trying to say that saying that Todd McFarlane just should mind his business and not look at him as a competitor. When I feel that Todd would have to look at him as a competitor working for Marvel, and it being going against everything that they said. And that's why all of the publications at the time were like, "What is going on? Work for hire? You guys are doing work for hire again." You know. So that is the first start of it, and Rob kind of calling Todd to task for being complaining about Marvel and having all this animosity against them going to Marvel when basically they all backed Todd when he complained about Marvel and all their bad practices. They didn't say Todd is wrong. We were thinking about working with Marvel and Image at the same time. We always were thinking that, but when we saw we could make enough money, we didn't have to do that. And that would have been honest. They could have went against him, but they stood as a unit. And then now they're like, "Hey, we're not a unit. Todd is kind of crazy." While everyone else, like Peter David and Byrne, is saying, "Hey, Todd is kind of crazy," and they're like, "What jerks?" And now, and now Rob is like, "Todd is," without saying it, "Look at this jerk. Listen how he sounds. Look at how crazy he sounds." Well, then, can you complain about Byrne calling him the toddler or something like that, or the stuff that Peter David was calling him? But it's what side of the fence you're on now. So, so then, Cal, you there?
Still listening.
Oh, okay. So then Rob started taking his books to Maximum Press, and Todd was kind of against that and feeling like you're becoming a competitor. And he's like, "No, I have the right to take those books out." Now, he does have the right to take his books out, which he did, but at the same time, you'd have to respect Todd being upset with it. So then, of course, they have the breakup. We have the Now, can you? There was a point that you were making earlier about that actual breakup that's in the documentaries that Rob isn't bringing up about how he found out about it.
Say that again.
The part you were talking about being on the floor at the hotel.
Oh, well, that was from that documentary that they did, and he says it himself. He says that the guys are getting together to ascertain what they want to do about Rob, since he want. I mean, I don't think the way that it's portrayed from Liefeld's perspective is that, hey, he's independent, he can do these things, and it's not a big problem. But the idea is like, look, you can't have books at Image and then do your own thing over here competing against Image. That's not what this is supposed to be. This is supposed to be, literally, you're supposed to be a part of this house, and you're looking to get money through the house and get money elsewhere, which is without a doubt definitely a Rob. That's a Liefeld move if I've ever heard one. Okay,
Mhm.
in terms of business, hey, why not? If I can get these books published over here, and I can do my own thing over here, more money for me, right? I mean, that was Heroes Reborn. Heroes Reborn was a cash grab. But the one thing that I'll give McFarlane over that is that nothing would have been bigger than McFarlane coming back to do even so much as an issue of Spider-Man. Or even now, I mean, that would sell hands down. Guys would be chewing through steel to get at that book. The variants would be off the wall. Everybody would have loved it. Would have sold like nobody's business. It might have even outsold what they were doing with the numbers that X-Men did at that point, or Death of Superman for that matter. But he never did it, and that's not something Liefeld is saying. Well, he's not doing it because he can't get the type of deal that he wants with Marvel and so on and so forth. And I'm certain, okay, I'm certain at this point, if he wanted to do it, okay, he could do it, and I'm certain the money would be tremendous at the end of the day. And there's no holdup. I honestly think from what you get from Todd McFarlane that for him, there is a point where he's like, no, we came to do this particular thing, and we're supposed to do it. Now, where McFarlane might not necessarily be on the same page as everybody else is like, well, that's great, that's what you want to do, but I don't necessarily want to do that. Even if I'm part of here, I want to make money. I want to sell these books, make some money. I see what you want to do and how Image helps you to do that. Not necessarily on the same page for me. But Liefeld is, he's over here doing the shenanigans, and the guys from Image get together and they're saying like, look, we got to talk about this, what we're going to do about Rob. So there was supposed to be a meeting that they were all supposed to attend. They were all supposed to attend. Liefeld says he's going to show up, but he doesn't show up. Instead, he rents a hotel room right next to the hotel room where the guys they're all supposed to be meeting. So he's there, and he's there with somebody else, and they're literally on the floor eavesdropping on the meeting that he's supposed to be at. So he knows everything that these guys feel and think about the situation and what they're going to plan to do, and he reacts to it. Now, that's not part, and that wasn't part of the whole, well, it's like, well, no, I decided I just wanted to leave because of X, Y, and Z. No, you saw that you got a confirmation of what was going to happen, and you decided you're going to beat these dudes to the punch.
That's the horror of it, of saying, now in this point he's saying, well, I already moved my books. I was out of Image when it was like he wasn't out. Obviously, if you were out, you would have just said, hey, I'm out. But he wanted to sort of slip it by and nobody say anything, which he didn't do. So then, of course, they were like, hey, this is a problem, which it was. Which is like, and they saying, well, because you're taking all these books and taking the money out of the company. Yes, that's an issue but at the same time, that means they would just have to downsize. But who wants to do that? That's one of the hard things to look at, is saying, well, we had this thing running. We kind of, we have enough people to do X amount of books. Now we got to downsize. So in the end, he talks about, the suits that they had against each other. And then to prove that Todd is, not the guy he said he is, he brings up all of the suits that Todd has been to. Now, I am one to have brought up Todd's suits because to prove that the Image Comics as a whole wasn't about creators' rights. But that's if I'm talking about them not being about creators' rights. Rob is talking about a feud between the two of them. Bringing up Todd's other suits is just character, just damning his character, assassination. Like he's just, it's just, I always call it argumentative bartering, like saying, hey, well, you think he's all right. Look at all this bad stuff he did.
That
What is it?
was that's probably the lowest part of that podcast,
Yeah.
where he's throwing out, oh, look at this lawsuit, and look at this lawsuit, and look at this lawsuit. And you're supposedly a good businessman. I was like, you got to be kidding me. You'd have to look at some place like Disney. Disney's without a doubt, hands down, one of the best businesses on the planet. And we know that they have to deal with a ton of lawsuits, on a regular basis. But that's what happens when you get to that particular point.
Yeah, and that's it's not as if we're gonna do. And yes, you can. Those are bad, but it's not like Rob didn't get sued by Joe Simon. The only thing is that they worked out a deal where he would, since he was using a character that looked exactly like the Fighting American, and he was saying calling it an echo, it was a tribute to Joe Simon, all this other stuff. Joe Simon's like, no, but if you pay X amount of dollars, you can actually use that character. And they worked out a deal, but that only came through the suit. He could have went to Joe Simon in the beginning, but because he didn't want to, he said the business is I can make a mock-up of any character that I want. I can make a fake Captain America, plug in all my things, and it's like that's the same sort of image type business that goes along. But I mean, in his podcast, he kind of talks about the suits he's won, that sort of thing. So it's like, should we like Rob more than we Todd? And it's like they're the image guys. They're kind of looked at as we have ones that we like more than the others, but they kind of all fall in the same sort of thing. So I think we covered it, but we've been, we've constantly going back to this observations because we just had to put another perspective to it because I know nowadays if it's in print and if someone vocalizes it, it's facts now. Oh, Rob said that this is facts, but at the same time, we need to hear some of the other sentiments that's in the comics journals, that's in the comics buyer's guide, in Wizard, some of the interviews that they had, some of the stuff that is out there so we can get a full view of it because comic history, a lot of people are gone and a lot of publications are gone and it's hard to find this stuff. And in Rob's thing, he's piecemealing the stuff he wants, even in like this thing, when there's pieces to some of his podcasts that he could put all of the information in. I think so. That's one thing that kind of he misses on some of his things, where it's like, oh, what the kind of what bleeds leads. What would be the best thing for this thing when it's like it's a podcast? You put it all in there. Like you don't have to piecemeal it. But I mean, and you could also say, hey, these are the mistakes we made as a publisher. That's what I'm waiting for. I need to see some of the struggles, some of the things where he said, hey, we're doing this, and it's kind of like, that was just it's like everyone wants to be that. He's the poster child of what we all want to be. Someone that could draw close to similar to Arthur Adams with a little bit of who's that guy with Michael Golden? We say if he grows, that's what I was saying. When he grows up, he's gonna who knows what he could become. If you have Bill Sienkiewicz, who's a Neil Adams clone who became Bill Sienkiewicz, or you have Byrne who became Byrne after that. Like, what will he become? And it's like, nope, they're gonna stay that style because that's what's successful. So it's and then the successes are something that you look at and say, oh, I wish I wish I could have done that sort of thing. But then the way he utilized it kind of went to the wayside, which is kind of sad. But he's still a name that keeps getting out there. He now has what's that thing? Snake Eyes out there, which I'm not sure how it's doing, but there's a little bit of buzz around it. Any last words from you, Cal?
Oh, I would. There's so much more to say. There's so much more, but we do have to wrap it up. So I'll just say, look, it could have been, especially now when a lot of guys are not very interested in comics history, that you have a podcast, and obviously you have people who are tuning in because they genuinely, like you, and me, we genuinely have an interest in comics history, give us the history. Give us the history. You were there. I think we were having this discussion before, and one of the nice things of being around when certain things, like if you were around when Mike Tyson was fighting and you were actually around, you're not reading it in a book, you're not looking at it on TV. You were actually there, so you know what the public perception was regarding Tyson and his fights and so on and so forth, and how people reacted when he lost to Buster Douglas. That's great because you were actually there. That's what I would prefer he actually give. You were there, you were part of it. Give us that. Okay, not the shot taking, okay, not the pat on the back, not the, definitely not the extra congratulations on what you got right, which is fine with the absence of anything that you may have gotten wrong or the couching of it. Just give us the history. You were first, you're an eyewitness. Just give us the history. Nobody really wants more than that. At least I don't.
All right, so thank you guys for listening. Please like, subscribe, and comment, and attack whatever you guys want to do. I've already gone through that on Facebook with Rob, so if he wants to attack, attack. But anyway, Spinnerack,
Out.
laters.